Hi, it's Evan Pagan, and you are just one insight away from a huge marketing breakthrough. And in this video series, I'm going to share with you tips and tactics and strategies and insights that I've used to now build 10 different businesses and brands past the $1 million level. You'll also discover why some companies can get a flood of new traffic and new customers while most companies don't, and they wind up on the glide path to oblivion and they ultimately fail. So let me show you a real-world example of how and why this happens out in the marketplace. What I'd like to do is just take a look at the marketing of art, right? Because it's one of the most instructional, kind of inspiring, attention-grabbing, and kind of curiosity-building lessons that I've been learning. So this guy is the most successful artist that's ever lived. His name is Damien Hirst. You can look him up. He's worth hundreds of millions of US dollars. And behind him is one of the most interesting objects that's ever been created by a human being, or more than one human being, as the case might be. This is what's called a Hirst spot painting. And it's a white canvas with different colored spots that are uniformly placed on the canvas. Any guess what one of these spot paintings goes for? Turns out that these paintings have been selling lately at auction, there's more than one of them, for some of them over $1 million. Okay, the highest price that's been gotten for one of these is almost $3.5 million. And here's what's interesting about them. There are over 1,200 of them. So this is by another artist. This is called A Balloon Dog by Jeff Koons. This is the balloon dog in orange. Any guess what one of these sells for? Would you guess $58 million for a chrome orange balloon dog? There are 5 of them. You know, each one owned by a different hedge fund billionaire or something. Yeah. But those guys aren't even the most interesting story, I think. Who knows who this is? Yeah, everyone recognizes Andy Warhol. Famous for making paintings of Campbell's soup cans that now sell for millions of dollars. So this is the turquoise Marilyn, brought $80 million at auction. 8 Elvises, $100 million. That one sold for. Silver car crash. That's the piece right there. You can see a person standing in front of it. $105 million. People talk trash about these guys all the time and say, that's not art, and the emperor has no clothes, and all this kind of thing. And one of the collectors of, I think it was one of her spot paintings, said, you know, no one gets it. Their art is marketing. Right? They've actually elevated marketing and made it into an art, and that's why we love them so much. That's why we pay so much for their pieces. By looking at things like this, it helps us realize that there is hope. Who has something right now that they offer as a product or service that just intrinsically has a lot more value than a silk-screened picture of Marilyn made by somebody's assistant? Who's selling something that just has more intrinsic value than that? Right? And who feels like maybe they could learn a couple of things from these artists who are getting $80 and $100 million for their stuff that isn't worth as much as the thing that you're trying to sell for $100 or $1,000 or $10,000? I think that there's a lot to learn from it, and I'm really studying it. And I'm trying to apply all the models and the methods that I've learned in marketing and understand how these guys are able to do it so incredibly well. The essence of marketing. The essence of marketing is an insight. It's an insight about a solution to your customer's situation that, once they get it, changes how they think and feel about their situation and your solution and why they need it. And with this change in their thinking being immediate and forever. Right? So it's an insight. You have an insight, you communicate this insight to your customer, it creates an immediate and forever change in how they see the situation. Okay, it changes everything, literally, for them. And then it sets up the conditions where communication is possible and where persuasion is possible. So first they get the insight, and then they get the feeling, and then they take the action. It starts with the insight, then they get the feeling, then they take the action. So think, feel, act in that order. And once you really nail whatever this insight is for your customer and your market, and you refine it, which we're going to do here, it can become what I call your nexus. It becomes the unifying principle behind everything that you do, behind all of your communication, your decision-making, even your planning in your business, all of your strategy. So a few examples that have been big for me in my businesses that I've built. So when I was teaching dating advice a lot to men, and I was also doing a lot of dating, I was trying to figure out what is going on here, what's happening behind the scenes that I can't see that's a bigger, more fundamental realization that's causing the dynamic of women feeling attracted to men. Because the way it made sense to me was I would go and talk to an attractive member of the opposite sex and have a conversation, and if I was nice enough, and if I was courteous enough, and if I asked sweetly enough, you know, maybe she would like me, and then I'd be able to get a date and maybe get a girlfriend. But when I started making friends with guys that were really good at the attraction game, and I watched what they actually did, none of what they did came from that playbook that I got. They were doing a bunch of stuff that didn't make any sense to me. You know, and I'm the kind of guy that would like go to the bar with my journal and be like taking notes while they're talking to a girl and interrupt them and okay, stop for a sec. Why did you just say that? That doesn't make any sense. And you're laughing, you know. And after months of doing this, I realized things are not the way that I see them. They're far curiouser and kind of weirder, right? And through a kind of series of thoughts and experiments, I had a realization. And the realization is that attraction isn't a choice. The attraction that we feel for another person, it isn't a choice that we make. We don't go inside and add up all the person's positive qualities and then put all their negative qualities and then do kind of a Thomas Jefferson analysis with ourselves and then say, oh yeah, wow, this is a really great person. I think I'm going to turn on my attraction. We don't do that. It's either happening or it's not. So I realized that attraction isn't a choice. It's actually something that's triggered. And once I got that attraction isn't a choice. She's not choosing it. She's not choosing whether or not to feel attracted. It's something else going on. And I got to go do the things that trigger it. And then I started doing all these counterintuitive things and then watching it happen. Right? That was it. I'm permanently changed. I can't go back. I can never, once I've had that aha myself and I've seen it happen in the real world, I can never go back to, hi, wow, you're really nice, and sorry to interrupt you, but can I try to convince you to like me? I can't do that anymore. Like can never go back there because the game has changed. And once I really got attraction isn't a choice, and I started teaching that, and I started saying it, and when a guy would come to me with his problem, and he'd say, well, I have this girl, and I work with her, and I've been stalking her for years. She just doesn't love me, and she's dating this jerk, and the answer could kind of almost always start with, attraction isn't a choice. Okay, she's not choosing it. So you got to stop bringing her flowers and sending her cards, and you got to stop that because you're trying to convince her to do it. It's a very foundational reframe or new way of seeing the world that once the other person gets it and it settles in, they can't do things the way that they've been doing them before. Just they can't do it. I started my first major kind of seminar that turned into a video course, and I actually started out and I said, attraction isn't a choice. If you meet a woman and you interact with her long enough that she forms an impression of you, she kind of feels like she gets you, and she doesn't feel attracted to you, there's nothing you can do about it. No like buying her flowers or convincing her. You can't like turn on that primal fundamental feeling of attraction through convincing. It doesn't work that way. An attraction isn't a choice. If you meet her and you interact with her long enough and she forms an impression, she feels like she gets you, and she does feel attraction for you, there's nothing she can do about it. There's nothing her friends or her family or you can't talk her out of it. Ooh, he's a bad guy. He drives a motorcycle. That's dangerous. Right? Now, once a guy hears that, if he's coming from the paradigm of convince a woman to have approval, once he hears that, there's an effect. It's kind of like, you remember the old movie The Matrix and Neo with the thing plugged into the back of his head and you could download the program for flying a helicopter or whatever? It's like, I know Kung Fu, right? There's a little bit of that happens to a guy who's coming out of this old paradigm and has lived there for decades, and then he gets that and he just says, oh, I know Kung Fu. And then what does he also say? I want to learn. Show me the way. Teach me. How does this work? And that's when he's interested in buying the programs, buying the training. Who in here, raise your hand if you're a man and you went through that sequence and you met me through that course and found attraction as a choice and it was a big deal for you, right? So there's probably 20 guys in here. Right? It's a pretty interesting insight. Okay, another one. Business success. Success as an entrepreneur. It comes by understanding your customer avatar. This really formed the foundation of a lot of the training programs and the teaching that I did. Is once you get inside the mind of your customer avatar, the mind and the emotions, and you understand who they are, and you can run a model of them inside of you, and you can think about marketing and then imagine how they're going to feel. Once you can run customer avatar inside of yourself, you can do a great simulation, you can really succeed in business. Because you understand what it's like to be the other person, and you're building an experience for them. You're setting up the whole thing almost like building a Disneyland kind of an experience where everything that they're going to have happen was thought of and planned by you and tailored to them, tailored to that person, that personality, those particular characteristics, those psychographic and demographic characteristics. You're talking right to them in a voice that they can hear. My Wake Up Productive program, big insight that I got from a couple of teachers and mentors was that productivity is not about actions, it's about habits. When I moved from productivity being about doing certain things or making a checklist or doing this thing that you're supposed to do because it's the highest priority, from actions to habits, because we're creatures of habit and we wake up and we basically do the same things in the same order every day. And since we're already creatures of habit, let's take our energy and change our habit. But then that brings with it the realization that it takes about 30 days to actually change a habit. And you have to fight against the gravity that the habit has in your life. You have to take your attention and your willpower and invest it in changing the habit. And you can't be scattering it and trying to change a bunch of habits at once because that's too hard. So you change one at a time, and you do it over 30 days. Big piece of the puzzle. And then that becomes the foundation for the whole course, and for the marketing, and for all the communications. And this, again, this becomes this thing that I'm calling your nexus. It becomes that unifying, guiding insight that you use for everything. Right? With Wake Up Productive, for example, the name Wake Up Productive, I asked myself, what is it that my customer really wants? What do they really want? Well, they want productivity, because that's a word that when I've surveyed and asked questions that they use a lot. I want to be more productive. But they don't want to have to put effort and energy into it. They want to just wake up and have productivity happen. And so the promise of the program is, if you go through the course for 90 days and you watch the first video and a few fast starts, and then you watch one video a week for 90 days, you will wake up at the end of the 90 days and you'll be twice as productive as you were. And you don't have to do anything. You just wake up and you'll be more productive because you've changed your habits. It automatically happens. Now these insights, these essence insights, they take a while to figure out. What most people say is, okay, great, let's get to work on it right now. Okay, let's take the next 30 minutes and find ours. But that isn't the way that it happens. The way that it happens is you try, you come up with the best you can, you go out and you test it, you talk to customers, you ask them what they think, you run your marketing, then you come back, you circle back, and you say, okay, what have we learned? And then you refine it, and it keeps focusing and getting tighter and tighter and tighter until it turns into something like attraction isn't a choice. It took me probably, I don't know, a couple of years to get it all the way to that point. Now there were evolutions of the idea that came along. Like on the way to attraction isn't a choice, were insights like tease a woman. Tease her. If you meet her, say something to like joke around a little bit, rather than doing one of these, please, love me. Okay. Now, you can see how they're not the same thing, but you can, if you get enough of these, tease a woman, never made sense to me. It just didn't, but it worked. It was pragmatic. So I learned a lot of kind of canned ways to do that worked most of the time. And so that was good enough. But then when I understood that attraction isn't a choice, I didn't need to always rely on tease all the time. I don't need to do that anymore because I understand more fundamentally what's going on. So if you don't have the core insight, if you don't have this kind of essence insight, you got to walk around with a lot of techniques and you don't know why they work. And it creates an insecure version of you, insecurely creating a business and creating marketing because you're kind of shooting in the dark. But when you get these core insights and they become the guiding principles behind all your communication, it becomes very powerful. Okay, so we're going to do this exercise called the essence of marketing. Again, the essence of marketing is an insight. It's an insight about a solution to your customer's situation that once they get it, changes how they think and feel about it, your solution, and why they need it, with this change in their thinking being immediate forever. First they get the insight, then they get the feeling, then they take the action. Think, feel, act in that order. Once you really nail this insight, once you get it right, it becomes what I call your nexus. It becomes the center of all your thinking, marketing, planning, and communication strategies. So what I want you to do right now is answer these 4 questions. What does your customer believe to be true but isn't? What are they doing right now to get the outcome they want but is actually counterproductive for them? What do they not realize that, if they did realize it, would cause them to take a new path and invest in what you're offering immediately? What is the insight that they need to have that will cascade through their beliefs and feelings and ultimately lead them to realize that you have the answer that compels them to take action and that they need to buy your product and service to solve their problem? Okay, what's the insight they need to have that's like attraction isn't a choice? It's a big aha. So what we're doing here is we're trying to zoom in on the areas where we could get this insight, where it could be. And by starting with what do your customers believe is true but isn't? Where do they have a misconception? That's often, a great starting point. What they're doing right now to get the outcome they want, but it's actually getting them further away, that can be a great opening, kind of handhold or a place to get access to this. What do they not know, right? But if they realized it, would cause them to take a new path. And then what's the insight that they need to have? What's the aha that they need to have themselves? So this gives us a few windows into what could possibly be this nexus insight. So as you just saw, one insight can lead to $1 million marketing breakthrough. And it's the difference between why some artists can sell their pieces for millions of dollars while most artists go completely unnoticed. This is also why some companies can attract as many customers as they want and get those companies to pay premium prices, get them to pay really high prices, while most businesses struggle to even get a few customers to give them money.